One. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Welsh Republic podcast, episode 137 today. Long time no see, everybody. I was on holiday for 2 weeks, so sorry if it's been a bit of a while. I had a good rest, and I want to welcome my guest, Iskolat. How are you doing today, Iskolat, and how's everything doing in Latvia?
Hello, dear viewers. Thank you for listening to us. I'll start with a rather blunt message. I'll just say that the current situation in Latvia is pretty difficult because Europe as a whole is approaching a new economic crisis because we're seeing some very troubling signs in virtually all economic sectors, and Latvia in particular, and Baltics as a whole. We have very harsh repression going on against the socialists, against the communists, and generally people who do not agree with the nationalist dogma, with this system that is being enforced. And let me go into a little bit of detail. Not a lot of people have heard about the Baltic states, primarily because they're very small, and Europe already has many countries as it is. For example, a lot of people mistake us for the Balkans because it sounds similar.
Yeah, a lot of people do. I made that mistake too.
Yes, but that's totally fine. Of course, it is very good to know geography, but it's all right if you make a mistake a couple of times because you can obviously learn from it. But despite the lack of international attention or fame, so to speak, actually the Baltics is a very, very important region, and Eastern Baltics in particular. So
Why
the
would
the
you say like the Balkans is a very important region in Europe, like with the resources? How come would you say that?
uh, Well, mostly we have water resources, so a lot of fresh water through lakes and rivers. Also, we have sea resources, fish and whatnot. But most importantly, the Baltics, it is a very, very important trade node because it has trade routes going both uh, in the east-west direction as well as north-south, because we're actually not far from St. Petersburg. I prefer to call it Leningrad, one of the biggest cities out there, and we are this junction that connects Russia and Western Europe. So that is why it is very, very important. And a lot of wars have been fought here since the 12th, 13th century, uh, when the German colonization started. When the Crusaders arrived, they defeated the local tribes. They established their states, all these vassal states. So we had the Catholic Church, the Teutonic Order, the Livonian Order, and various archbishops and bishops who established their states. And the Crusaders wanted to expand further east in order to subjugate the Russian states, such as Pskov, Novgorod, and eventually Moscow. But they were stopped and defeated by Alexander Nevsky, who united the splintered Russian factions. It is very well portrayed in an old Soviet movie that is simply called Alexander Nevsky. I think it was shot in 1937 or 38. It is a very good movie, and it shows just how much people can achieve if they have leadership, if they have organization, if they have
What
morale, they
what
have strong.
other what sorry to interrupt here, but what other movies and books would you recommend for people to read? Like for me as a Westerner who are wanting to study about the history of Latvia and the history of it during the Soviet Union, and what films do you really recommend for people to watch?
Well, there is a problem because most of these materials are available either in the Baltic languages or Russian. We have extensive literature about it, about all of the periods, starting from the Stone Age and essentially up until the modern era. But the resources in English are very hard to come by. Most of what you have is primarily nationalist schlock, and I'll go into that in I'll go into more detail a bit later. So, strictly speaking, you have a very good book that is called The Baltic Riddle by Makesons. So he was Lithuanian, and he published this book in 1943 at the height of World War II, when the Soviet Union was fighting for its dear life. And it usually details the events that happened in the late 19th, early 20th century. So he describes the labor movement in the Baltics, how strong and organized it was, because we are a developed, industrialized region. And he tells about all these things that happened during World War One, during the Revolution, and how the nationalists came to power, and eventually how the nationalist regimes were overthrown in the Socialist Revolution of 1940. The book is very, very well written. It is available online, so you just have to search The Baltic Riddle, 1943, and it should give you the full text. It's a really nice introductory book. And speaking of, for example, things such as fiction and novels, we have a very good author. His name is Vilis Latsis, and he used to work as a farmhand, as a farm boy, as a fisherman, and he has a lot of very good books about the lives of regular Latvians during that time, during the First World War, during the Revolution, during the Nationalist Republic, during World War II, during Socialist Reconstruction. And his most famous novel is called The Fisherman's Son. It is very good. It is essentially the Latvian modern classic, and actually, it is the most translated Latvian book. I think it was translated into more than 64 languages, and it has millions of copies published. So it is really big. So you should read that if you can come by an English translation. Can you excuse me for a bit? I quickly need to take a phone call. I'll be back in a bit.
Sure, no worries. That's all good. So, ladies and gentlemen, Latvia is a very interesting country. It's a country that has a lot of, history to it. I'm really interested to talk to him, Iskolat, about how the history of it right now, especially with how it's doing in the Russia-Ukraine war. It's because I read something today, folks, saying that Latvia has plans, unfortunately, to go after its Russian majority. It was saying this statement by the head of its parliament. I don't know if this was last year, but it said on censorship migration, it's saying that a lot of the Russians who live in Latvia actually have 90 days to leave, and it's not very good. And especially, you can definitely, as Iskolat was saying here, Latvia right now seems to be, a country that is being infiltrated by the globalist, Rothschild banking cartel that control NATO, that control the European Union. And especially with it happening, you can definitely see, what me and Iskolat, before we began the show, we were talking about the rise of nationalism and how that's becoming a bit of a problem in Europe, and how we're starting to see like the rise of McCarthyism, and how this is kind of like the Red Scare 2.0. Ladies and gentlemen, he's back. Welcome back, mate. Sorry, I was just saying to the audience. So like you were saying before.
Yes, I'm back.
Yeah. So like you were saying before about Latvia and like the books.
Primarily these are the two books. We actually have more papers and research that we publish, for example, on Twitter and, for example, Reddit. We actually have a group that is called the Baltic SSRs, although it is not as active as it used to be, simply because we're all very busy right now with our lives, with work, and we have very little time to do this, but we still do this nonetheless. And you can actually explore it both on Twitter and on Reddit, and we're planning to branch out in other platforms. So we have a good reading list there that you can check out. Mainly, it consists of shorter articles, translated articles, and all the materials that we've compiled about the Russian Civil War, about World War II, the interwar period, and so on and so on. And we're publishing more and more stuff, mostly because we just have to do a lot of translation work. The thing is, the reason why you hear so much about Latvian nationalism and about about their point of view, their reach, is because they simply prey on ignorance. Because they know that a lot of this stuff is not available in English, or it's simply very hard to find, and that is why they can remain on top of the ideology, the propaganda game in this instance.
So, Iskolat, I was mentioning, just before you went on a bit of a break with the phone call, right now, I've been doing some research and I've been seeing, Latvia, that you mentioned to me that they seem to be targeting socialists and communists in Latvia. And especially, how you have the rise of nationalism in Europe, whether especially, in Germany right now, because
Yes.
Germany, they're having the conservative party, there, and Germany now is wanting to become more independent, and they're wanting, to become, away from America. They're wanting to move away from America and become their own, power and stuff. When you see that problem, so like right now, especially, like last year when the Russian, with the Russia-Ukrainian war, even though you could argue it was not started by Russia, it was actually started by Ukraine in 2014 with that coup back then. I
Yeah,
can't really
yeah.
remember what it was. How scary is it for a socialist like you to be living in Latvia? And because a lot of people say that Latvia is becoming a bit of a Nazi state, how bad is the Nazism growing in Latvia compared to Nazi states like Ukraine and Bulgaria and other states? How bad is it right now, and what do you think is the future of Latvia? What do you think the future holds for Latvia? Do you think that Latvia will leave the European Union and join Russia, the Russian Federation? Because some people think that. Or do you think the future looks bleak for Latvia? And what do you think the future of Western Europe holds? Do you think Western Europe is going to become more Nazi-like, and everybody is going to go back to how Western Europe is going to go back to how it was in World War II, when it was very far right? And what is your opinion on that?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, you can definitely say that the Baltic states in general and Latvia in particular are very, very reactionary, very nationalist, and I can say with certainty that the Baltic states are now openly fascist. They have been for a long time, actually, since the early 1990s. And when you, for example, talk about Ukraine, you don't you need to remember that essentially the Baltic states acted as a blueprint for the Ukrainian nationalists, because, for example, we have all these events commemorating Nazi collaborationism, the Baltic SS units. For example, here every year on March 16th, we actually have a memorial SS parade. I kid you not, that is a real thing that's going on in Riga, and counter protesters are routinely arrested. They're detained merely for protesting, literal Nazis.
That's
And
absolutely. You kidding me? That's crazy.
yes, yes. And up until the year 2000, actually, March 16 was the official state holiday. By the way, they actually had to cancel that because, yeah, they were a bit too obvious with it, and the overlord, the United States, criticized them for it. And I think they've canceled the official holiday in preparation for Bill Clinton's visit. But still, it has ample state backing. This SS stuff. You see a lot of politicians joining it. Obviously, they say it has nothing to do with Nazism. We're only celebrating our Latvian patriots. The usual nationalist dog whistles. And I'll get into that historical thing later, because there's a lot to unpack here. So I just need to explain the current situation a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So in the late 1980s and early 1990s, we had a huge nationalist wave. So the Soviet Union was engulfed in all sorts of revisionism, in all sorts of anti-communism and nationalism. And since the party was heavily weakened from within, it allowed the closeted nationalists, all these nationalist cells and various Trotskyist cells, eventually to take over and completely destroy the country. And the anti-communist movement in Latvia was particularly strong because a lot of the high-ranking Nazis in 1944 and 45 managed to escape west. They were redlined to the west, and because of their visceral hatred of socialism, they were used by the West, by NATO and the EU, to sabotage the Soviet Union. For example, in the late 1940s, early 1950s, all these Nazi resistance cells that were funded by MI6, by CIA, and they were trying to reignite the civil war in the Baltics. It didn't work out for them, so instead they resorted to ideological sabotage and ideological work. For example, a lot of their agents were sent as some sort of, cultural envoys, attaches, in order to spread the nationalist propaganda. And in the 1950s, the Khrushchevites pardoned a lot of Nazis who were imprisoned, and they returned home to West Ukraine and the Baltics, and they could spread nationalist propaganda practically unhindered. It continued to fester well into the 1970s, and by the late 1980s, you had huge nationalist forces operating within the country. But they were not strong enough to completely take over. They relied on various opportunist elements within the Communist Party. So, for example, the likes, such as Andropov and Gorbachev. And when the party was weakened enough after the events of August, the attempted coup to displace Gorbachev, then the Baltic nationalists essentially could assume total control because the communists were demoralized heavily. They could not put up enough resistance. They could not put up a good fight. They were fractured, and immediately upon seizing power, the Communist Party was banned, and a lot of people who came to the Baltic states after World War II, they were stripped of their citizenship. They were declared non-citizens. So essentially, what the nationalists did, they say uh, the Soviet Republic was illegitimate. We were occupied by the spooky, scary Soviet Union. Everything Soviet was illegitimate. We are the continuation of the interwar nationalist republics, and everybody who is not descended from this interwar republic was to be stripped of their citizenship. In essence, they reintroduced the apartheid that was in South Africa, that is now going on in Israel and many other countries. So in Latvia and Estonia, you had hundreds of thousands of people with no citizenship. So the Soviet Union was destroyed. It did not exist anymore. But these people, hundreds of thousands of people, were not given Latvian or Estonian citizenship. So they were still the subjects of the Baltics, but they could not participate in the elections. They couldn't get elected. They could not become government officials. They could not become attorneys, and they had a lot of
right now, what is it like for socialists in Latvia? Can they participate in political party like elections, or no, they can't at the moment, especially with this current, government that's controlling Latvia? Can they or no?
The Communist Party has been banned, and any communist organizations are also banned. And recently, they banned a communist study group and a human rights organization that was called the Workers' Union of Latvia.
What year was this?
Workers'
When
Front
was
of
it
Latvia.
banned? What year was this? When was it banned?
It was banned last year. So the Secret Services requested the court to ban the party, and citing all these anti-communist laws, they could ban it. The organization appealed it, but the court upheld the decision, and right now they're appealing it again. I think it will probably go all the way to the Supreme Court and maybe the European Court. Although there's not much hope, but we still need to try. I used to be a member of this organization. Sure, we had some disagreements, but they were still doing good work. They were trying to fight against fascism, against the demonization of the Red Army. And for that, yes, they were banned. The original Communist Party was also banned. There's the Socialist Party of Latvia, but unfortunately, it's more of a mild social democratic party. So it doesn't do anything worthwhile. And they were pursuing the legal course. So they were not building an underground structure that could act independently, and they were relying on all these current laws. So essentially, they were hamstrung from the very beginning, and now the Socialist Party of Latvia does not enjoy a lot of support. A lot of people were put off by its very mild policies. And right now, it's mostly irrelevant in the current politics, unfortunately.
I read last year that Latvia was also planning to culturally, get rid of its Russian population because the statement of the head of the Parliament Committee on Censorship and Migration said during an interview with the state media said that Russians had 90 days to leave Latvia. Was this during the war? And was this during, when Russia's thing kicked off with Ukraine, or was this a few years ago back? And how is there many Russians still in Latvia or not really anymore?
It is true. It was initiated last year, so they're using the war that kicked off in Ukraine as an excuse to crack down on anyone who disagrees with the nationalist state. So a lot of people here who ended up becoming the so-called non-citizens essentially were stripped of their rights. They were stripped of their citizenship. Many of them simply assumed Russian citizenship because they had more rights. I mean, it is really, really absurd. In Latvia, you have more rights simply as a foreign national than as the so-called non-citizen. So essentially, it is very similar to Bantustan papers in apartheid South Africa. So thousands of people assumed Russian citizenship because they simply had more rights. They had less travel restrictions, and they could receive two pensions at once. So the Russian pension and the Latvian pension. And since the wages here are low and the prices are high, this became a lifeline for many people, so that they could, they could live somewhat comfortably. Especially since there are many of them are old people, they're already retired, and the Latvian state apparatus decided to punish them, and it enacted this barbaric policy that your residency permit is to be canceled, and unless you file for this Latvian language test and pass it with a relatively high grade of 50%. Again, this is very difficult for old people. If you don't pass, you're going to get evicted and deported. And they're now starting to do this. They're starting to freeze people's bank accounts. They cannot receive their pensions anymore. They cannot receive medical aid. They cannot pay their bills. They're getting evicted, and they say if people still refuse to leave, as they say, on their own accord, but it is essentially a deportation, then they're going to get deported. They're simply going to get deported and left at the border. So this is just how cruel it is. So the fascists here, instead, they're just fighting old people and school children because they already canceled the school education in minority languages, so Russian, Belarusian, so all languages except the European Union languages. So we still have a little bit of Polish education, but since there's not a lot of people of Polish descent, this is not noticeable. So it is primarily targeted against the Russian minority in Latvia.
What was Latvia, if you compare it now, what was Latvia like during the golden age of the Soviet Union? And what would you say your country was famous for, like, in tourist wise? What was it known for around the world when it came to food and culture? And what is the meaning behind the Latvian flag? And what role did Latvia play in, like, when it came to help defeating the Nazis in World War II?
Yeah, that's a really good question about history because actually our history is very, very rich. I was not born in the Soviet Union. I was born after in the 1990s, and I was already born within the capitalist system. So I can already feel it I can feel it inside and out, and even without this experience, some people may call it nostalgia. I can simply see how things are getting worse, and they're getting worse at an accelerating rate, because you can see just how much the infrastructure is crumbling, how many schools are closed, how many hospitals are closed, how many people die and emigrate. For example, every year we're beating the record for critically low birth rate levels. So, for example, by the end of 22, they reported that we've had the lowest birth rate in 100 years. So, in our entire recorded history, modern history, that is. And in 2023, we broke the same record again. We have less and less people that are getting born. A lot of people die, and unfortunately, many of my relatives died, unfortunately, because of untreated cancers, untreated cardiovascular diseases. We have very high suicide rates in the Baltics. In Latvia and Lithuania, it is comparable to Japan and South Korea. So it is insanely high. We're always in top 10 when it comes to suicide rates, because life is very, very difficult here. People can barely make it until the next payday. And you can see the overall desperation and hopelessness that you have. But that's what our enemies want. They want us to give up. They want us to become desperate. They want us to become disconnected from the struggle, from the people, and that is what we must not allow. And speaking of history, the Latvian flag actually arises from a folk legend that I think is actually quite similar to the Austrian flag. That is why our flags are similar, and that is why many people actually get confused when they see the Latvian flag. So they say it's quite similar to Austria. So a long time ago, there was the Livonian Wars, the Livonian War, when the German Crusaders invaded, and one of the tribal chiefs
That was
went to
during the Holy Roman Empire, wasn't it?
yes,
Yeah.
yes, the 12th, the 13th, and the 14th centuries. So there was some really fierce warfare with the local tribes trying to fend off the German Crusaders, the German colonizers, and one of the Baltic chieftains was grievously wounded in battle. They laid him on a large piece of cloth, and unfortunately, he succumbed to his injuries. But when they lifted him, uh, the cloth formed two distinct stripes of red with a white stripe in the middle that was untainted by blood. So it both symbolizes the revolutionary struggle, the struggle for freedom, and the pureness, the serenity of the Latvian people. That is the symbolism behind our flag. And the flag that you see on my avatar has a star in it, and this is the flag of the Iskolat Republic that was founded shortly after the October Revolution of 1917. The Iskolat Republic was founded in December 1917. I think it was December 21st. And the name actually comes from Russian, and it means the Executive Committee of the Latvian Soldiers, Peasants, and Workers. So in World War II, by 1917, the German Empire was advancing deeply into the Baltics. They had all of Lithuania all under their control and roughly half of Latvia. So the river Daugava was a major barrier for the Germans, and the other half of the country remained free under Russian control. But by 1917, the Germans managed to punch through and they captured Riga. And then the Russian Revolution kicked off. And the Baltics was a very industrialized and organized region. So in the revolution of 1905, we had one of the biggest concentration of strikes, protests, and revolutionary activity. And the region was very, very pro-communist. And right after the Russian Revolution, the Latvian soldiers and workers and the free areas gathered. They held the local council elections, and the communists won with an overwhelming majority. I think it was somewhere around 94, 95%. And then they formed the independent Latvian state. So the Iskolat Republic is actually the first Latvian state ever established. Then the Germans completely overran the Baltics. and they remained here for about a year after the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. So this was a peace treaty that was signed between the German Empire and Soviet Russia, and it was intended to simply give the revolutionary forces some wiggle room in order to regain their strength, in order to maneuver, because the counter-revolution was already brewing. There was a huge civil war going on, and the revolutionary forces understood that they would lose if they would try to fight on multiple fronts. They had to make a very big sacrifice, and essentially they had to cede all of Ukraine, all of Belarus, and the Baltics and Finland to the Central Powers, to the German Empire, including Latvia, the Baltics. But the Latvian revolutionaries understood that this was a necessary sacrifice in order to buy time for the revolution, for it to gain strength and strike back. And then a bit later, the German Revolution happens in late November of 1918. The German Empire collapses, and the revolutionary forces seize the moment and liberate virtually all of these areas that were captured by the imperialists. But then the forces of reaction had another trick up their sleeve. They declared their own nationalist republics. So they used this patriotic sentiment, this liberation sentiment, in order to further their own goals. They founded several puppet republics in Ukraine and Belarus and the Baltics, so Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia, in late 1918. And the Russian Civil War was huge because it was a huge civil war that contained several civil wars within itself. So it had the Ukrainian
Yeah,
Civil
there was a lot. There was a lot.
Yes. The civil war in Finland, the civil wars in the Baltics. At first, the revolutionary forces were successful. They managed to nearly destroy the nationalist forces, except for one city in the southwest, Liepāja, and they declared the Latvian Socialist Soviet Republic in January of 1919. So it was the first fully fledged Latvian socialist state, and it immediately enacted a lot of reforms. So it destroyed the supremacy of landlords and barons, the German barons. It immediately proceeded with the land redistribution. It immediately proceeded with workplace reforms such as the 8-hour working day, the right to maternity leave, the right to vacation, the right to, for example, some time during holidays, for example, hospital leave, and for example, reimbursements for example, workplace accidents. Because up until that, until the revolution, the Russian, the Baltic, the Polish workers were working for 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, 13 hours a day. So it was a huge progress all around. The emancipation of women, women could finally participate in the elections. All these national reforms, for example, all of the languages in Latvia were declared official. So the Latvian language, the Russian language, the Polish language, the Yiddish, etc., etc. Riga alone had dozens of nationalities living in it because we had a lot of workers from different areas of the Russian Empire: Estonians, Lithuanians, Latgalians, Russians, Poles, Jews, everybody. They had magazines, newspapers, massive book printing, education programs. The first truly Latvian university was also established by the socialist government. But then the capitalists managed to reorganize, they managed to regroup, and with the backing of the German and then British imperialists, they managed to strike back and destroy the Socialist Republic by 1919 and 1912. And after that, a vicious White Terror started. I think you've heard about the Finnish White Terror that happened in 1919.
Oh no, I never heard about that. What label us? Tell us about it. What is the Finnish terror, and what was the name of the group that was associated with Finnish terror? And like in history, when you mention Finnish terror, what else have the Finnish terrorist group done before in history in other countries?
The Finnish nationalists led by Mannerheim. So he was a former Tsarist officer who sided with the nationalist forces, and there was also a bitter civil war in Finland with the Finnish communists on one side and the nationalists and Germans on the other side. And in order to crush the revolutionary spirit, the nationalists proceeded with brutal massacres, and more than 30,000 people were massacred in Finland alone. So anyone who was even remotely associated with the labor union, with the progressive movement, they were hunted down and brutally killed in city streets, almost everywhere, with no due process, with even without even the slightest pretext of legality. People were simply shot in the streets, and left to rot, quite literally. And it was forbidden to pick up the bodies of fallen comrades. And the same thing happened in the Baltics. The same thing happened in Lithuania when they crushed the Lithuanian Belarusian Soviet Republic, in Estonia, where they crushed the Estonian labor commune and killed anyone who resisted. And the same thing happened in Latvia. And in Latvia alone, at least 10,000 people were murdered. And in Riga, more than 3,000. So if you're remotely associated with any progressive movement, the nationalists simply snatched you and shot you, even on the street. They just simply did it openly like that. And it is actually similar to what happened in Indonesia, the Indonesian terror, when General Suharto took over and he started massacring the communists. So it is very, very similar. So it was brutal, and already all these progressive communist socialist organizations, they were banned in the Baltics, in Finland, and they had to work underground after the civil war ended. So the revolutionary forces here were defeated, and the Soviet Russia was forced to sign peace treaties with all these nationalist governments, because they understood that they were not strong enough to take on the entire imperialist camp. Yes, they had to sue for peace. Yes, they had to admit defeat. They had to do that in order to rebuild and regroup. And that's when the interwar period starts. And all of these progressive forces in the Baltics and Finland, they had to act in the clandestine fashion. They had to work underground, and the strikes and protests were forbidden in the Baltics. So here we had a pretty ruthless nationalist regime that violently suppressed strikes, that violently suppressed protest activity. So it was either the nationalist way or the highway. They had show trials against the revolutionary forces, and a lot of people were either shot by these nationalist tribunals, or they were killed by plainclothes Secret Service agents. And the police responded with live ammunition every time labor demonstrations took place, every time labor strikes took place. And various memorial dates like the 8th of March, the Women's Liberation Day, or the May 1st, the International Labor Day, it was forbidden in Latvia. It was banned. You could not celebrate it.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of crazy stuff. I was reading that that everyone, I was reading from a blog. This guy said that often, the Nazi past of Ukraine is bad, but it's even worse apparently, like in Lithuania and Latvia. And it says that the country next to Latvia, Lithuania, was an independent country from World War I until 1914, and the Nazis came in, they annexed the territory of it. And there are a lot of Jews who got killed there. And it says here that Lithuania was the southernmost of the Baltic states during the Holocaust. Germans murdered 90% of the Lithuanian Jews, one of the highest victims in Europe. When you compare Lithuania's, monstrosities when they were controlled by the Nazis, what was Latvia like compared to Lithuania? What was Latvia like?
Oh, very, very, very similar. So the reason why Nazi collaborationism was so widespread in the Baltics is because we were ruled by these nationalist regimes for 20 years. And 20 years, that's a lot of time. So all this nationalist propaganda was widespread. All this chauvinism, hatred, bigotry was, yes.
It also says, it also says here that up to 90% of them died during the Holocaust. Their Jewish culture, including its unique language, which was something Yiddish. It almost was
Yiddish, the Yiddish.
Yiddish, and also crushed by the racists, and really crazy, really sad. It says here, it's really sad. That really must have been tragic.
Yes, yes, it was that brutal. So the Holocaust of the Soviet people, of the Baltic people, of the Russian people, of Belarusians, it was really, really savage. And the 95% figure is absolutely true.
How would
The
you compare it? How would you compare it to, like the Ukrainian Nazis, killing of the Polish people in World War II? And how would you compare it to, the Croatian Nazis killing a lot of the Serbs in World War II compared to the other one? Like compare
Very,
this.
very, very, very similar. Brutal to the extent that even many Nazis themselves were actually horrified by the sheer brutality, and a lot of this violence, a lot of these mass killings, they actually started even before Nazis captured all these cities and regions, because when the invasion started, the Soviet Union was evacuating everything they could, because they understood that they could not hold the forward positions. They had to retreat. They had to reorganize. And because we had a lot of nationalist sleeper cells still active, they immediately sprung into action. They started taking over all these local councils, all these cities, and they immediately started enacting these brutal mass killing campaigns in order to reassert their dominance and in order to frame, for example, certain nationalities for all the bad things happen. So trying to pin the blame on the Jewish people, on the Romas, on the communists, and everyone was savagely
The
persecuted.
Slavs too. They were trying to
Yeah,
blame that on the Slavs too. They hated the Slavs.
yeah, yes, yes, and I will get into that in just a moment. So in Latvia, it was just as savage as it was in Lithuania. The Latvian Jewish population was smaller than the Lithuanian one. So Lithuania had up to 300,000 Jews, and Latvia had 70,000. And just like in Lithuania, virtually all of them were massacred. By the end of the war, something like 3,500 Latvian Jews survived. That is the extent of the Holocaust. And in Estonia, they had even less Jews. But for example, in Estonia, they were so savage in killing every single Jewish person they could find that by late 1942, the Nazis officially declared Estonia as Judenfrei, as Jewish free. It was that savage.
That's just absolutely terrible. That is, the I've read some of the stories that the Ukrainian Nazis did to some of the Polish citizens, and to hear this, in Estonia, wow, this is just it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Some of the things you hear, the massacres, You there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was just
Yeah.
listening to you. Yeah, I would go on, and I will list some of the most horrific atrocities that happened in Lithuania. Many people have heard about the Vilnius and Kaunas pogroms, and they even started before the Nazis actually arrived in the city. So the so-called Lithuanian Patriotic Front (LTF) took over major Lithuanian cities, and they immediately started savagely killing their own neighbors, the Jews, and everyone suspected of aiding the communists. So these people were gathered in public areas, in squares, in parks, and the nationalists stripped them down naked and starting just ruthlessly murdering them with mundane items. For example, bashing their heads in with crowbars, lead pipes,
Oh
etc.
God.
And the nationalists were celebrating and singing songs, like singing the national anthem, and the Germans were filming it. You can actually read the testimony, for example, of the German photographer. I think he was either Hermann or Hans Gunzilius, and he was filming the Kaunas massacre. And a lot of these horrific pictures are actually from him. People getting stripped bare and then just bludgeoned to death. In Latvia, we have several synagogues that were burned down with people inside. For example, the Great Coral Synagogue in Riga. A lot of Lithuanian refugees managed to hide there, but they could not outrun the Nazis. So the nationalists barricaded the doors with people still inside and set the synagogue on fire and killed at least 500 people. And they all filmed it. It's on reel, actually. If you watch German war reels, you can actually see them setting the synagogue on fire. And then we have several huge massacres, like the Rumbula massacre, where the resistance and the Jews were driven to a nearby forest near Riga that's called Rumbula. And again, they were forced to dig their own graves. They were stripped naked and then either shot or bludgeoned to death. And tens of thousands of people were killed that way. We had several death camps in or around Riga, the most infamous of which is the Salaspils or Kurtenhof death camp. And at least 100,000 people were killed there. And when the Red Army was approaching in late 1944, the Nazis killed all the remaining prisoners and set the camp on fire in order to destroy any evidence of the sheer massacres. And the Nazis, both the local Nazis and the German fascists, were absolutely ruthless to the Soviet POWs. We had several POW camps here, the so-called Stalags. I think it was the Stalag 345 and the Stalag, I think it was 355. I might be a little bit mistaken with the numbers. We had two huge POW camps, and the POWs, the captured partisans, the captured Red Army soldiers, the commissars, the officers, all these supply officers, they were forced to work themselves to death. And anyone who resisted, again, was killed. And when the Nazis were actually on the back foot, when they were retreating, they also killed all the remaining POWs. So the total death toll in Latvia was absolutely huge, up to 500,000 people in total killed. And it does not include. It also includes the people who were brought from different regions of that were conquered by the Nazis. We had the infamous Riga ghetto. A lot of the German, Austrian, and Polish Jews were brought to this ghetto, and then again they were worked to death. And when the Nazis were retreating, the ghetto was destroyed, and the remaining people were either killed on the spot or then brought to the Auschwitz death camp in order to get killed. And the same ghettos were set up in Vilnius, in Kaunas, and many cities in Belarus. And the Baltic Nazis were savage in war crimes committed in neighboring countries. So the Latvian Nazi auxiliary units were also involved in war crimes committed in Russia and Belarus. So the partisan activity in eastern Latvia, or western Russia, and Belarus was really, really widespread. The Germans could not really control it. And in order to break the resistance, they wanted to destroy the popular base. They simply wanted to kill all the people who might support the anti-Nazi resistance. So they initiated the so-called Winter Wonder operation, and it was carried out in December and January of 1942-43. And hundreds of villages were burned down, and all of their inhabitants were murdered simply because they were suspected that they might help the partisans. And the Latvian Nazis were really involved in this. All of these Sonderkommandos, for example, the Arais Commando, were involved in the mass killings, and many of these units would end up forming the Latvian SS in late 1943. So the Latvian nationalist regime now denies any wrongdoing, denies that all these atrocities happened, and it refuses to investigate these mass killings, and it refuses to aid Belarus and Russia in trying those who are responsible. And some of these surviving Nazis are still in Latvia. They haven't faced any punishment, and the Latvian nationalist regime refuses to do anything.
It sounds like, how the CIA was protecting, Ukrainian Nazis during Operation Paperclip, and the Zionists were too. It's just, wow. The fact that, as a Westerner, the fact that the British government, the United States government were protecting these war criminals, it's so unbelievable, eh? It's like, it just makes you think, wow.
It's not really surprising. Yes, I can hear you. All right. It's not really surprising because after World War II, the imperialist camp utterly failed. So, yes, initially the British imperialists and the French imperialists believed that they could force Germany to fight the Soviet Union alone, that the Soviet Union would be completely isolated, and that Germany would be it would
Well, yeah,
have
Nazi Germany, like Hitler was funded by the Rothschild, he was funded by the Zionists, he was nothing. He pretty much, was brought into power at the end of the Weimar Republic by the bankers so they can try and, take down the Soviet Union, push, like the agenda, New World Order policy, and they can also bring in, I think, Operation Unthinkable. That's what it was, that's what it was all a part of too.
Yeah. That is absolutely true. That Hitler's election campaign was bankrolled by all these huge German industrial giants and imperialists, because for them it was either Hitler or
Which was
bust.
funded by Bush's family too. Bush had an impact.
Yeah. That is also known. I think there is also a good book by one of the German industrialists. I don't remember his name, and the book is literally called "I Paid Hitler." You can actually look it up, and it details all these business dealings between the German industrialists and Hitler. Because, like I said, it was either the Nazis or it was the Socialist Revolution, and obviously they cannot allow that to happen. So, in order to do that, they bankrolled the Nazi Party, and the full name of the party was the National Socialist German Workers' Party. They understood that the ideas of liberation, of freedom, and justice were very, very popular among the people of Europe, the world. So, in order to defeat that, they simply used the sentiment in order to trick the people. So, they named their party the German Workers' Socialist Party in order to mislead the people into supporting them. And that also partially explains why the Nazi support was widespread, because many people genuinely believed that they were socialists, that they were just, but it was just a ruse. It was a cover for imperialism, because Lenin once famously said, every time our enemies are defeated, every time imperialism is defeated, it comes back wrapped in socialist fabric, wrapped in socialist rhetoric, wrapped in socialist colors. And that's what they're doing right now. And that's why you have this resurgence of far right nationalist and fascist movements. But don't be fooled by it. It's just an illusion. It's not going to bring any change. It's just another weapon of imperialists. And they're just trying to secure the status quo, the current order of things, using this ruse by feigning solidarity with the people, by feigning this popular image, by feigning this friend of the people image. So they're just trying to dupe you. They're just trying to trick you into supporting them. But all of these far right governments, they will still support the imperialist course. They will still do the same things that the imperialists were doing before. They're just going to do it with a pink, with a popular, with a red coat of paint. And that's why you should not be fooled with this stuff, such as Maloney or the alternative for Germany, or the Dutch far right party. I don't remember what it's called.
Absolutely. Yeah. They're members of the. Just to let you know, Maloney, she's a member of the WEF, just like the Argentinian. I'm a libertarian, and I don't even think the new Argentinian prime minister, he's not a libertarian at all. He's just an actor for the WEF. He is on the website of that too, and he even funded lockdowns. He was asking for more lockdowns back in 2021 and all that stuff. It's just, keep going. Just saying.
Yeah, and for example, the guy that was elected in Argentina, he was elected on the same basis that people were tired of this stagnation, and that is why, because the people were not organized enough, they could not see the rules, and unfortunately, they were tricked by the capitalists into electing this fraudster. So, what the people need to do, we have to raise our consciousness. We have to fight for our education. We have to fight for our knowledge. We need to support the real alternative, not the phony alternative like the alternative for Germany, but the real just alternative. There might be disagreements on how to do it, but for example, the communist forces present an actual way forward, a way to permanently change things for the better, not to hide behind all these various slogans, not to hide all the behind all this phrase mongering, but to actually change things, to actually give the people control over their lives, over their resources. And that's what we understand when we say equality, because equality is not making everyone drink the same water, wear the same clothes, eat the same food. No, it is about destroying class exploitation. It is about destroying the rule of capital, the rule of the dollar. It is about actually letting the honest working people be masters in their own house. So that's what it boils down to.
So when you look at like right now, talking about Western Europe, one question, I sometimes talk to people, I hear, a lot of, big political YouTubers saying, some socialists and libertarians, some people say, oh, America would be better as a constitutional republic. It would be better as a libertarian state or a left-wing state or economist state. When you talk to when you talk to right wingers, and of course right wingers are not particularly a fan of socialists, and they'll go off to China and they'll say, oh, China's the enemy of the world and Russia too. When you look at like China, how do you think that United States, in your opinion, how do you think America would be better off as a socialist communist country? Do you think its political system would suit it? And do you think it's possible, especially with all the diverse groups of how the industry works, do you think America would work? Do you think communism would turn America into an economic success like China is right now? And the question is, I also ask you is, do you think if the founding fathers were still alive and knowing, about the globalist elite, the Zionists, bankers who control, like the London bankers who control the W of Western Europe and fulfill this new old order policy, do you think the founding fathers would have been communists? What's your opinion to that?
Yeah, it's a really good question that actually that is getting thrown around a lot, especially when it comes to discourse within the socialist and communist circles, because actually you have quite deep splits there. But I'm absolutely convinced that the North American United States, actually that's the correct definition, because also have the Brazilian states, the Mexican states, and generally people like when you differentiate. So originally even the country was called the United States of North America, so it's more correct. Anyway, back to the main topic. Yes, countries like the United States would definitely benefit from socialism, would benefit from a communist revolution, because essentially it is the only way to unite all these peoples that inhabit the land. For example, you have the native people, you have the black people, you have the white people from that came from many European countries, and that is the only way to diffuse all this racial and ethnic tension, because it is created on purpose by the ruling capitalist class in order to keep the people divided, in order to keep the people
And the
distracted.
bankers who control the United States too. The bankers, the Federal
Yeah,
Reserve.
the capitalist class. I mean, it's not strictly the Federal Reserve, because all of the government and all of these capitalists, all of these bourgeois actors, they are in this together, because any state is a tool of unlimited violence, and any state means that there is a class that controls it. And the state can either be a progressive socialist state, or it can be a reactionary capitalist state. And that's a huge distinction that we need to make, because simply doing away with the state overnight is not the solution, like the anarchists make it out to be. No, because our enemies, once they're defeated, they're going to come back 10 times stronger, 10 times more angry, 10 times more organized, because they were not expecting this defeat. For example, they were not expecting a defeat in Russia, for example. They were not expecting a revolution in Germany. They were not expecting the revolution in China, in Korea, and many other parts of the world. So the workers absolutely need a state at the beginning in order to crush the resistance, in order to crush the exploiters. Because, for example, all these guys from these capitalist institutions, from these agencies, from these industries, from these companies, they're not just going to give up and say, "Oh, you won. That's it. We're out." No, they're going to resort to sabotage. They will try to have you killed. They will try to get back at you in order to restore their dominance, and that is why the dictatorship of the proletariat is necessary. I do not shy away when I say a dictatorship, because it is a word that simply describes the monopoly and violence. And you have to distinguish between classes, because you have to understand that the revolutionary violence is inherently good and the counter-revolutionary violence is bad. And that is the same principle that was used in these capitalist revolutions when they wanted to destroy the monarchies, when they wanted to destroy feudalism, for example, in England, in France, and the United States. I mean, the founding fathers were just going to, I don't know, talk the British into letting them go. Of course, the British would not allow to do that. So they had to resort to violence, because when oppressor refuses to sit down and negotiate, you understand that the only way out of this is through violence, because your oppressor is not going to stop unless you stop him. And right now, all the horrors that are happening right now in Palestine, this proves us
Yeah.
right time and time again, that the oppressors, that the slavers, they will not stop unless we put an end to it. And speaking, for example, of revolutionarism, of socialism, and the founding fathers, you have to understand the context that they were in. They still had this class consciousness within them. They were still born in a mostly feudal society. So, for example, the likes of Washington or Benjamin Franklin, they still had a much worse understanding of the world, because they were born in a very repressive feudal society that had a lot of capitalist elements within it, and they understood that in order to move forward, uh, you need to have revolutionary power. You need to have a revolutionary state, and that's what needed to happen. The French revolutionaries understood that as well. For example, the likes such as less revolutionary types such as Robespierre and Danton, and the more revolutionary types such as, for example, Babiev, and the another huge revolutionary that was assassinated, uh, Marat. Yes, yes, Jean-Paul Marat. So we need to actually move past the founding father mentality, because what was suitable, for example, for the 16th, 17th, 18th century, it is not enough. It is definitely not enough for the 21st century, because we have so many revolutionary knowledge already, and we have so much revolutionary practice. And that is why we need to move beyond that. And we have to actually look at the classes, because I'm getting pretty deep into communist theory, but it is important to always remember about the classes, and it is always important to remember uh, which class does this or that action benefit. And right now, the age of capitalism is essentially over. It needs to go away. It needs to be destroyed. And right now, it is the time for socialist revolutionary action. And the United States, for example, is actually closer to a revolution than many other places, for instance. And if, for example, such a large country like Russia, India, or the United States, it does have a successful revolution, then I'm sure that capitalist imperialism is done for. Absolutely done
Yeah, many people think that. Like, I definitely think the United States, absolutely, with, whether you like it or not, Donald Trump. Like, I'm not a fan of Donald Trump, but he, the persecution of politicians. I mean, the United States is definitely like in an end of Rome Empire, timeline, like end of Soviet Union. It's very divided. It's very close to a civil war, if you think about it. Going back about the United States, by the way, I just wanted to ask, did you hear about Benjamin Netanyahu being on a Twitter space with Elon Musk? Did you see that?
Yes, I heard about it, and it actually shows you who all these politicians really ally themselves with. These are capitalist politicians. These are imperialist
Absolutely.
politicians.
And,
Yes, and
I just wanted to
Yes.
say, so as we all know, I was looking up research on this, and I was so blown away by how big the Zionist global Rothschild, mentality is in the United States, Congress. Like you have so many of these Congress members who will praise, the apartheid state of Israel. And there was a Congress member, a former Congress member of 2007 that said, sorry if I butchered this, but who said that in 2007, a lot of the Congress members have to sign an allegiance saying that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. And it doesn't matter, like even if it's Donald Trump, even if it's Biden, a lot of them are going to praise Israel. And it's just the amount of Zionist, whether it was, the Balfour, declaration of 1917, when in fact, Britain was losing World War One, and they wrote a letter, saying that they needed help by the Rothschild and Rockefellers, to bring in the state of Israel, saying, look, if you guys help us out, we'll overthrow the Ottoman Empire and we'll bring in the Zionist state of Israel, during 1917, with the help of that. And, when you look at the statistics, when you look at people like, Benjamin Netanyahu, especially people saying, to Elon Musk, Elon, why don't you go to Gaza? Like, because Gaza's the other prison. When you look at these statistics, can I just show you some?
Right now, it's an open air death camp. That's
Oh,
what it is right now.
absolutely. And you bring it and look, and I've done research on this, and you probably have too, and by this amazing website called Americans New, and it's just like, the amount of Palestinians, it says here since the year 2000, so it doesn't include the information of October the 7th, 2023, but it probably will have that soon. But it says since the year 2000, 8,434 Palestinian children have been killed compared to 117 Israeli children since the year 2000. There was also a thing says here from January 1st to September 6th, 47 Palestinian children were killed. You've also got statistics saying here, ever since, the Israeli genocide in the Gaza Strip, 2,000, people have been killed. Over 3,000 have been injured. 67 journalists have been, killed. Some of them have been, jailed. You have the mosques have been destroyed. You've got 266 schools that have been destroyed. You've got 1,040 facilities that have been destroyed. 446 health staff have been destroyed. You've got 2,010 deaths have been killed, like workers, doctors. You've got health facilities, 124 health facilities have been destroyed. And what's even worse, it says here in a statistic by, I think it's Al Jazeera says here, child deaths in convert zone. It says here that 136 children per day are being killed in Gaza compared to that of Syria, which was only 3, Afghanistan 2, Yemen 1.5, Ukraine 0.7, Iraq 0.6, and it says here 4,000 in Gaza right now. 4,100 kids have been killed in just 30 days. Compare that to Syria, when 12,000 kids died in 11 years. Afghanistan, 8,099 children died, and then you've got Yemen. It's crazy. What is your opinion towards that? And like, how do you see, like, to hear those statistics, right? How does that make you feel? Because to hear that just makes me boil. And knowing, the Zionist influence on the United States government, it's insane. It's absolutely insane. How anybody can allow this.
Yes, it is.
Keep going, like you're saying.
Yes, it is, because the support of capitalism, of imperialism, the support of capitalism and imperialism in of itself is crazy. It is indeed a mental illness, because no sane person is going to support the system that makes this happen, that fights against children, that ruthlessly kills children. And people are absolutely right when they call Israel a Nazi state, because that's what essentially it is, because it is the most extreme, the most chauvinistic, the most...
it's like Saudi Arabia. It's like Saudi Arabia. What they're doing to the Yemenis people.
Yes, exactly. The most vile, the most depraved form of imperialism, the most chauvinistic form that relentlessly fights against the progressive minds, fights against children, fights against the fight against the entire peoples and entire nations. And you can actually see, when it comes to Israel, just where the capitalist imperialist interests really lie, because Israel is their stranglehold. It is their unsinkable aircraft carrier in the Arab world in West Asia that allows imperialism to plunder the entire region, to hold the entire region in a chokehold. And Biden, when he was still a senator, once said that if there wasn't a state of Israel, we would have to create an Israel in order to secure our
Yeah, in order
interests
to
in the region.
secure.
And it flatly tells you what they really want.
Yeah, it
And
is.
what the Israeli yes, yes, and what the Israeli regime is doing, it is eerily similar of what the Nazis were doing. Because you have to understand that the word Nazi or the word fascist, it is not a brand, it is not a label, because it simply reveals you the true depraved nature of capitalism. Because fascism is their last straw. It is their it is their, I don't know, what's it called, an inflatable boat. It is the thing that capitalism uses when it is absolutely outnumbered, when it feels threatened, when it feels that it is in danger, because it always throws off its mask and resorts to the most unimaginable violence, the most depraved kind of violence. And it doesn't depend on your nationality or ethnicity, because all the capitals of the world will try to defeat us. They'd rather see us dead. And you have to remember that, for example, uh, any other worker from anywhere else in the world is much closer to you than the capitalist, the property owner of your in your own country. For example, for us, a worker from India, from Africa, from Latin America, he's a lot more closer to us than the capitalist in our own country, and that is why you need to distinguish, because it is not about the Jewish people. It is specifically about the Jewish capitalist class that is supported by the capitalist classes of the United Kingdom, of France, of India, of United States, and we must fight against the capitalist class, and we can only do it together. And right now, the Jewish people everywhere in the world are speaking out, are rising up against this
Absolutely.
monstrous state.
It's not Judaism, it's Zionism too. Zionism has got nothing to do with Judaism. Zionism is a like a racist ideology. You get what I mean? Zionism is an ideology. It's got nothing to do with Judaism, and a lot of Jews are rising up, especially in the fact back in Palestine, back in the day, Jews, Christians, and Muslims lived together peacefully. And Judaism has nothing to do with Zionism. Zionism is not Judaism at all. Zionism, even when Zionism was created, a lot of Jews did not like Zionists at all.
Because it is the same thing that was being done by the European fascists in the 20th century. That the capitalists, once they realize that they cannot do all these monstrous things openly, they try to wrap themselves in this popular label. They try to claim that they're doing everything in the interest of the people. For example, the German fascists claimed that they were doing in the interest of the German nation, and right now the Zionist imperialists, the Israeli fascists, are now claiming that they're doing this in the name of the Jewish people. It is very important to crush this illusion, to fight against this illusion, and right now we're seeing that the Jewish people all over the world are resisting these attempts to frame them, because in order to save their skin, the Zionists will readily frame the Jewish people, because they're trying to turn the vast majority of the people into their accomplices, and we must not allow that to happen. Because
Absolutely not.
yes, because the capitalists are just trying to sow discord and mistrust, so that, for example, the Jewish people would not trust the Arab people. That, for example, the I don't know, the European people would not trust the Arab people, and so on and so on. It is a conscious design by the exploiters, by the capitalists, and we must fight against these tactics by any means. We need to fight in the information space, in the propaganda space. We need to go out in the streets, and direct action is also necessary. That is, blocking all these imperialist embassies, blocking the weapons shipments, blocking all these aid transfers, everything we can do in order to
stop this massacre in particular, and stop all the other massacres perpetrated by imperialism. The massacres that are perpetrated in the Congo, in Yemen, in Myanmar, Burma, and everywhere else in the world. The cartel massacres in Colombia and Mexico, because again, it is caused by capitalist imperialism. The racial injustice in the United States, the extrajudicial killings of the black people, for example, the attempt to splinter the society in Britain and Ireland, for example, trying to provoke race riots so that, for example, the migrant workers would not trust, for example, the workers in Britain, the workers in Ireland, and they're doing that on purpose because they know as long as people stay divided, the capitalist rule is secure. So that is why we need to have concrete actions. We need to have concrete organizations because you need to go out and talk with your neighbors, talk with your colleagues in your workspace, in your workplace, in your university. You need to talk, for example, to the migrant workers because they're extremely disenfranchised and repressed. And the migrant workers are one of the most revolutionary people out there because they work day and night. Uh, they work relentlessly and they simply want to have a good life, a safe life, a just life, just like everyone else. Because you need to help them because people help each other.
So, one last question I want to ask you: with the world going forward, how do you see the future of like Western Europe? How do you see the future of the world? What do you think the world is going to be like as China as the world superpower? Do you think it will be better economically and socially? And what do you think Russia will be like, or potentially the second most powerful superpower economically and socially? And what do you think the future of America holds? Do you think America's heading into civil war? Do you think America's going to wake up?
I do think that the future will be bright because that's what the reality tells us, because that's what we see all over the world, because we have this huge revolutionary energy, this potential that is not being stored and that is about to get released. And speaking of China, it will not be the same superpower as the capitalist cronies are claiming. Understand that socialism does not mean exploitation, it does not mean subjugation, and that it's facing both internationally and internally, I do believe that it is going to be all right. Right now, through a very, very intense class struggle. You have all these capitalist classes, all these members of the bourgeoisie that are trying to retake back control. So you have all these faction conflicts inside. For example, if you remembered footage from the, I think, 20th Congress of the Chinese Communist Party, you can actually see that the members of the liberal Shanghai faction, the pro-capitalist faction, that they were escorted, that they were getting beaten. So China will bring a lot of good things to the world. And I do not mean the simple things like consumer electronics or consumer goods, because that's not the main point, but that's still important. But it's simply like with the Soviet Union, China shows that a different world is possible. A world without wars, without conflicts, without bloodshed, with no subjugation, and with no exploitation. Sure, China is still within the capitalist world because, as a whole, we still have a lot of capitalist elements, mostly, but it is still moving forward. And the same good things I can say about Russia, because right now the the revolutionary movement in Russia is very strong, because you can see people that are marching with red banners, people erecting monuments to Lenin and Stalin on their own initiative, just doing it all by themselves. And the government is forced to listen. It is forced to respond. And even the Russian capitalists understand that socialism is a huge force, and they're walking on thin ice. And I'm pretty sure after a while, the capitalists in Russia will be defeated. And believe me, socialist Russia will be a beast, just like China.
And as for the United States, the sooner this imperialist supremacy ends, the better. The capitalists will try fighting back. They will try to plunge the North America into a civil war if they can, because their logic is simple. If I can get it, nobody can. They'll try to blow things up. They'll try to burn the entire thing down. They'll try to kill and maim as many people as they can, because they understand. Because once one of some major countries, one of the major countries like India, Russia, or the United States, it does have a communist socialist revolution, then the imperialist supremacy is absolutely done for. And we understand that we have many allies, that we have many friends along the way. Even though we do not agree on absolutely everything, we still understand that this is one struggle that we still have to fight together, because it's either that or it's going to be destruction, it's going to be death. And the thing is that we fight for every single human life. Every single life is sacred to us. And the sooner we can defeat imperialism, the better, because we need more healthy people. We need more happy people. We need more people that are alive, that are not scathed by these imperialist wars. And that's what we're fighting for, because, like Engels said, today actually is Engels' birthday anniversary. He said that the true history of humanity is just beginning. It is just starting, and that the true happy human life is only about to start. And it is very similar to a Marxist thought that that socialism, the socialist revolution, will allow humans to finally become human. We will not be violent anymore. We will not be bloodthirsty, and we will truly live as happy, and because that's what reality is. Because we're heading, and what we have this so much potential that is now being wasted. And for example, things like the Paris Commune, the Soviet Union, the People's Republic of China, it shows you, it's pretty much just a taste. It shows you what humanity really has in store. And once capitalism is defeated, then humanity will really set off, and we will have the level of safety, abundance, and knowledge that we have never seen. And we need to fight for that. And even though right now I live in a very repressive state, I do not give up hope. I do not give up, because as long as there's one person who's convinced to join our fight, it is our victory, and it's another blow to the imperialist machine.
Well, thank you for coming on, Iskolat. It was a pleasure having you. Where can people find you?
I can be found on Twitter. You can just input at Iskolat, and you can also find me on Reddit. I'm also active on Telegram, the same alias. And you can search some of our groups, such as Workers' Struggle or Riga History Group. We're trying to manage language in Latvian, in Russian, and in English. We're still lacking in that department, because it is difficult to publish the same thing in 3 languages, because you have to translate it precisely, you have to translate it efficiently, and you have to spread it everywhere. Our work is still sluggish, I'll admit. We're still not as organized as we'd like, but it's a huge stepping stone that at least the Baltic communists, the Latvian communist socialist revolutions, at least have some sort of platform. We need also to branch out into the physical stuff. I mean, the strikes, all these worker support groups, all these mutual help groups. And I really hope that we can get that thing going, because we remember our rich revolutionary history. We remember the struggles that the Slavic and the Baltic people went through, the fight against the Crusaders, against all these countless empires, against Napoleon, against Hitler. And we must never give up our roots, our history, because we have to be one. The struggle will never end until we come out as victorious. The history has shown us that the power of the people is unlimited, and in the end, the people will still prevail. And even though the situation seems really dark, it's only like that on the outside. And I'm sure that Western Europe, Eastern Europe, the Baltic, Russia, we will enter a really, really bright future.
Well, thank you for coming on. It was a pleasure having you, Iskolat. You were a great guest. Just want to say to everybody, please go and give this guy a follow on Twitter. He's a very knowledgeable guy when it comes to Latvia politics. If you want to ask him anything about Latvia, he'll tell you everything you need to know. Also, go give him a support on his Telegram. And I just want to say to everybody, thank you for joining the Welsh Republic podcast, episode 137. Please remember to like and subscribe to this video, share it around with your friends and family, and remember to sub to this channel. Have a nice day, everybody. God bless you all and stay safe, and bye.
Goodbye.